Hello guys, my name is Daniel, also known as Dante the Metaphor. In this tutorial, in this quick tutorial, we'll be going through how to use the redshift curvature map, how to create edgeware, and also maybe we will look into how to overlay dart, directional dart on a material. So let's get into it. So here I have a scene with some simple geometry which we will be using for the test, and I already have a redshift dome light with an IBL plugged in, and I've applied a simple material, a redshift material, the default. So let's look into the curvature map. We can add a map, the curvature map. We right click, we go to redshift renderer, and we open the curvature map. And in order to see how it looks, we can plug it into the diffuse color and update the render. Sorry, plugged in the wrong map. Let's go redshift renderer, redshift curvature, plug it into the diffuse. And there we go, we have a curvature on the object on screen. So as we can see, the curvature map calculates the curved areas of the geometry and applies a value from 0 to 1. Although I think you can make the output larger than 0 to 1, but typically it's 0 to 1, where black represents the parts that there's no effect, no curvature effect, and white represents the parts where there is the curvature. The good thing about this map is we can use it as a, as a control map for a blend material. A material blender. So if we create a redshift render material blender, we can plug in the curvature to control where certain materials show up. But for now, we want to look more into the curvature map and how to adjust it to get the colors we want. So if you know about the blender material, you know it blends according to the colors that are plugged into the blend color. And currently in our curvature map, you can see that while we do have satisfactory colors on this angular geometry, on the torus here in the sphere, you can see that it shows up as gray, and we don't want that, because this would mean if we plug it in, this material would have like 50% of each material, and we want it to be black. We don't want these items to be detected as curved. So what we can do to fix that is double click on the redshift curvature, open the remap. Let's first look into the radius. The radius is, as you think, the radius of the curvature here. If we decrease it, it gets thinner. If we increase it, it gets wider. But what we want to fix for now is these this effect that we're getting on these spheres, on these curves, because they are curved and the curvature map is still detecting them as curves, but we want to get rid of them. So what we need is to push these parts that redshift is detecting as curves down into the blacks. One thing we can use to do that, to get rid of the gradient or the grays, is increase the contrast. So if we increase the contrast, we can see we get really nice contrast on this part, but we got the opposite effect. These got even brighter. What the contrast does is it boosts the colors. Let's say we have a range from black to white. It boosts the whites and boosts the blacks according to our threshold. So that's what the pivot down here is. It's like a threshold. So right now, since if you add the contrast and the parts, certain parts are getting lighter, it means the threshold is too low. We want to move it higher up so that we can cover even these curves. So let's push up the pivot a bit, and there you go. We got, I think that's what we want. I will make another tutorial going through every or deeper into these details of this curvature map and other maps that we will be using, but for now we are going to we are going to use the quick and easy method. So we got the curvature. Now if we look at the curves here, they are pretty linear all around. So what we want to do is add some variation to the curves. This doesn't look natural. What we can use is the radius. The radius affects the width of the curve. As you can see, the radius value is here, the one we just looked at. We make it wider, and we are losing some value, but we'll go through another course where we can control these values as we want them. So we can change the output range to get some more value, but don't worry about that. We will look into those later. Just know for this, the purposes of this tutorial, the radius goes, adjusts the width from thin to wide. Okay, so if we want this to be varied, we can plug in a bitmap or any other map. I think you can use a noise map or anything. We can plug in a map to control the width to make it irregular. So we want a noisy map. So let's look for like a grunge map, say this one for example, and you can see immediately there is some slight variation, but not as much as we'd like. Let's pull down the contrast a bit, because we want to get back to okay, let's just plug it in as it is. And one thing about bitmaps, you want to load black and white bitmaps that you will be using to control values, that is masks, bumps and such. You want to set them as using a gamma of 1. As you can see, we have some little detail. I think the reason why the detail is not coming out as we expect is because we don't have any UVs on this object. So the good thing about redshift 2.5 is we do have a triplanar map which we can add. We can just add a map, redshift renderer triplanar, or as I like to do it, if you're already plugged in and you don't want to disconnect the nodes and connect them again, just click on change material type. Let's look for the triplanar and make sure you have keep old map as submap checked. That will plug it in the middle of those two. Aha, and there you go. Now we have the bitmap showing as we expect. In order to adjust the width, I think it's a bit too wide. We can adjust the values of the bitmap. So we can go to the bitmap, double click on the bitmap, and open this output rollout. This does all the color correction you would want. Not all of it, but most of the color correction you would want with maps. Enable a color map. This is like the curves control in Photoshop. So we would like to turn the whites down so that it isn't so bright. So remember, bright means wider. I want to make it a bit thinner, so we can take this point and move it down. And it's still kind of too uniform for me. I want it to have a lot more thinner patches, so we can add a point and drag it down to increase the amount of blacks we have. You can see the preview of the map right here, and you see we get a very nice chippy look, but I want to get more. I think that looks good. Now that we have a map that looks okay for the edges, we can just use that for now. I won't go into tweaking it too much because it is a tutorial after all, just to get the basics. So let's add what do we call it, a redshift material, a blend material blender. What a redshift material blender does is it mixes materials one over the other, just like you would have a base color, layers of material. Like if you had painted metal, you would want the base to be a metal. There are hacks around this. You can use layers in different orders, but let's just do it the straightforward way, the most intuitive way. So let's add a metal base layer. So redshift material, let's add the base as a metal. We'll just use one of these presets we have. Use an iron metal, and let's apply it to the scene, this material blender. As you can see, it doesn't update. That's something redshift does. When you change the material to another material, you need to update the IPR. So there we go. We have the metal. Now we want to have a paint layer. We can have a primer and a primer layer and a paint layer for more advanced materials, but we will look into all that in another tutorial. Let's just add this material will be the paint. So let's edit the paint, give it a bluish color. I guess that would work. Oh, sorry, it doesn't show up even if it's the top layer, because by default the redshift material blender, all these other layers are switched, which are controlled by the blend color. So as you can see, layer 1 is the one we have plugged in the paint layer. The blend color is black. If we turn it white, we can get the paint through. This will be very useful when overlaying materials, because you can control where the material appears using a map, and that's where we're going right now. This is what we will use the curvature map we just adjusted and tweaked. We can plug it into, I'm not very tidy with my materials, to the blend color for the first layer, which is right here. And as you can see, we kind of went back to what we had. But if we zoom in, we can see that we are getting the color coming through, but not in the way we expected. It's opposite. That's because white represents where the material is showing up, and as you can remember, the redshift material blender showed white at the corners, so the paint is showing up at the corners. What we need to do is invert this. We can use an invert node. We just go to maps, general. The invert mode is in the output. It's a very useful map. We will look into it in a more advanced tutorial. The output does adjustments, like color adjustments that you would expect. So in one of those is the invert. We can use that. And as you can see, we already have our edge wear coming through. Sorry, I need to zoom the preview more. See, we get some of that coming through. I think we can boost, we can adjust the value of the edge wear. It's kind of weak, so we'll go back to the map that we're using to control the radius and bring it up a bit. I think that looks good. Now, seeing that we have that ready, if you want, you can go ahead and tweak it to your liking. We can now okay, if we look at the edges, you can see they're very sharp, and as you know, in CG, sharp edges are a no-no. They make it obvious that it's CG. The reason I didn't apply a chamfer, as you can see, I had some chamfers. You can apply a chamfer to get the chamfer. That's That's modeling stuff anyway. The reason I made a sharp material is so that I can show you guys Redshifts rounded corners map, which we can use to add some roundness. So we can add it to the metal, I think, which is the one which is showing through. So we'll just right click, add a map, redshift renderer, redshift rounded round corners, apply it to the bump. You want to apply it to the bump map of the material. And I don't know if you can see, it's not very clear, but it has applied some roundness. I think we want to apply it also to the paint because some part of it is having some weird effect. We would want it to apply it to both materials to just in case the paint goes over the metal. So I guess we have that for now for the edge. What do you call it? The edge control, and I think that's good. So that's a basic of how to use the edge. Let's go on and add another layer, a quick dust layer. I'm trying to do this really fast. Materials, redshift renderer, add a simple redshift material. This will be the dust layer, it will be on top of the paint. So let's give it white for now so that we can see how it looks. That's the redshift material. For dust, you want to give it the color. Now let's just, we're creating a Dashita. So let's just give it a dark color, dark brown color. Decrease the roughness. I mean increase the roughness. Sorry, okay, it looks more like rust than dirt, but we are still working on it. That's simply a matte shader. Dust is usually very matte, so we need more roughness. So what we would do right now is increase the diffuse roughness. We will go through the diffuse roughness and what it does in a later lesson, but you can see it. Let's turn this into a gray color so that you can see the difference. You can see it gives it that powdery look. If we turn down the roughness, you can see the angles are really defined, but if we increase the roughness, you can see it's kind of like it has a subsurface scattering effect. But we're just creating a basic dust shader for now. So next up we will add bump map. Remember, we don't have UVs, so this is where redshift's triplanar map comes handy, and plug in a bitmap with some dusty texture. You could use some noise if you're good at creating procedural textures, but I'll just use a dust. Yeah, okay, let's use that. See how it looks. You do want it to look like dirt. It's not obvious right now, but once we start masking it out, you will see that you'll see the effect we are trying to achieve. Let's decrease the blur of the map we're putting in. That's something Max does by default. Okay, now we have the dirt plugged in. Oh, this doesn't look like dirt, but anyway, we want it to appear only on the top side. That's how dirt appears usually. If you have like a bottle somewhere or a drum somewhere, that most of the dirt will accumulate on the top, but very little on the sides. So that's what we want. What we can do to get that is use, this is a trick I learned, use the blend color for the dirt map. We will use a triplanar, a triplanar map, and by default the triplanar map has colors plugged in. Now we want the triplanar map to project through only one direction, which is the Z. Z is the up and down direction. So we'll uncheck the same image on all axes, so we can have different maps on each axis. And as you can see already, there's a representation of the map. The green map is showing on top, the red on the sides, and the green on the other sides. We want the map to show up only on these, the dust to show up only on these top sides. So what we will do here is disable this, make it black, this, make it black, and turn this to white. And there we go. We already have some convincing, okay, it's not convincing yet, but some dart where we want it. We can adjust the triplanar and add some blending so that we don't have such a sharp fall off. But the blend amount tends to fall off a bit too much. You can play with the blend curve, which adds some contrast to the fall off. I just eyeball it till I get a result I think I like. I don't know if there's a way to make this map rounded, because it's still square, but it won't matter since we'll be plugging in a map. This is just to see the blend, the fall of how it looks. We'll be plugging in a map. This is the map that will control where the dart will appear. This is our dart map. I'm sorry, I do not know how to keep my nodes organized. I think this is our dart map, right? Let's give it some dark colors. We can get a, okay, I don't know, I guess that looks like dirt. Okay, let's plug in a map here that on the Z axis that will control the dirt. So I think I have I don't know, just plug in any map for the moment. This is mostly black. I think we would want to invert it. How does that look? Looks good. Now we have the dirt showing up. We want to break it up even more because it's too uniform. Yes, it is broken up in small details. We want some larger details. What we can do here is you change this into a composite map so that we can combine two maps, one for the small details and one for the large details. So we can use a composite. And use another map to mask out this one. So general bit map with larger chunks of detail. If you have a good collection of maps, this is where a good collection of map really comes in handy. But since okay, the layers, the masks, as you know, the white parts show through, the dark parts show through. This map was mainly black. I want to invert it so that we can get the opposite effect. We can't see much of the effect right now. I think we need to change the gamma adjustment. You want to always keep these black and white maps at 1, gamma 1. And since we can't see the effect a lot, I can see it slightly, but not enough. This is where we can push the map. If you already have maps which you have adjusted for this purpose, they will work very well. But since we don't have that and we don't want to go back to Photoshop, that's the point of this workflow. We can do all the corrections in Max 3ds Max. So we can push the adjustment here using the technique we talked about earlier. There you go, we have some randomish looking dot. I think we can also adjust this a bit. This is a matter of eyeballing and preference, and depends on the maps you're using and the amount of data you want. But as you can see, that's the good thing about this, you can control it procedurally, so to speak. You don't have to go back and paint new maps. You can just adjust the curves and get less dirt or more dirt, and there you go, we have dirt and metal. We can also play with the specularity and color of the dirt. This should be another topic in itself because we're running out of time, but to get the wet and dry material effect, we could go into the diffuse channel of the map and give it variation. So let's say use a smoke map, which already looks pretty good. It looks like soot, but we want dirt. Keep it dirty. Okay, now we want to, you can see we have some variation, but it looks like moist sand. Was it dry sand? We can play a lot more with this. I will make a lesson about all this, but we can use this to control the specular in this material. This same map, we can use it to control the specular. Where is the specular? The roughness, I mean. Sorry, you got me. And it's too shiny, so we can use our color correction map here. That would be the ideal way, but since it's just a tutorial, we can just tone down the effect of this map in here to get that muddy versus shiny look. We can also use it in the diffuse weight to see if it, no, not diffuse weight, the diffuse roughness, see if it has any effect. Yep. And the mud, the color looks too dark, too reddish. And there you go, we have kind of a dusty, muddy look, although we did lose some of the detail. I think it's due to the specularity. Yes, we can work on that in a later tutorial, but as you can see, we are getting kind of that effect where the darker dirt looks wet and the lighter one looks, of course, drier. You could also use this map to influence the density here, so that there's more dirt in the dense part. You could plug it into the bump or a displacement map to make the wet part higher. The control you have using a workflow like this is actually limitless. So I think I'll leave it at here, and then I will create more focused tutorials on making all those scratches, adding scratches. Those are very easy, because if you want to add scratches, you just composite like we did here. You just composite a map into the paint layer. So this is the oh my god, I've arranged them so randomly. This is the paint map. You just composite the scratches on top of it and the metal will appear. You would also plug in the scratch map into the bump of this, so the scratches would appear and be bumped. And all this using triplanar textures would mean you would end up with a shader that you can just plop onto any model and it would work with little tweaking. All you would need to adjust are the input maps, the curves to adjust the intensity. And I guess that's all I have for right now. Goodbye.